Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. David Haye, the manager for Derek Chisora, has hit back at Joseph Parker in his camp, labelling Parker's reason for turning down a Derek Chisora fight for April 20th as trivial. So a few days ago, David Higgins, Parker's promoter, labelled Chisora and his camp as actingly in a cowardly manner because they were trying to shorten Joseph Parker's training camp, and Higgins said, look, we're not going to put up with it, we're not going to negotiate any further, we wanted adequate time, we've been waiting for a contract for a month, you haven't provided it, we're not going to be fighting on April 20th. So I was expecting a response and it has come. So David Haye, he has spoken to media, and the story here, so it's being reported by tvnz.co.nz. It seems trivial. David Haye on Joseph Parker's reason for turning down Derek Chisora fight. So the article goes on to quote Haye as saying, it seems like a bit of a trivial reason not to have a big, massive fight in the UK that could really propel both fighters back into title contention. We were hoping they would battle it out to see who moves forward and who doesn't. When you have a date in mind, you start training. Start training for the fight, don't wait for the contract. And that's pretty much the sum total of David Haye's comments, well, at least included in this story. So there's a number of things to unpack from David Haye's comments, but also more generally this situation, because, you know, I can see both sides of the coin, but for Joseph Parker's team, effectively, they know a loss to Derek Chisora now is going to be pretty much fatal for his chances of a title shot anytime soon. Whereas Derek Chisora, it probably won't propel him back to a title shot. It would just ensure that he would get another big money fight somewhere. Having a scalp of Joseph Parker, former WBO world champion on his resume, a guy that took Anthony Joshua the distance, had a close fight with Dillian Whyte, and if he beat Parker, then obviously that is a very good feather in his cap for Derek Chisora. So this fight, it was always more upside for Derek Chisora in respect of if he got a win, it could really actually do some things for him, his career, his flagging career. He might have put up a good effort against Dillian Whyte, but he was knocked out, he lost, and it was his 9th professional loss. It's one of those things where Derek Chisora has been at that last chance saloon a number of times in his career. So if he had have gone in with Joseph Parker, got a win, certainly would have been very good for him. And Higgins obviously suspecting that Chisora was trying to crib some training time. They hadn't got the contract, even though requesting one for a month. He pulled the pin, and that's why they said, you know, your actions are cowardly. He accused Chisora and Haye of having Chisora already in camp for 3 weeks, training with his new trainer, Dave Coldwell, whereas David Haye is saying, well, actually, he only went into camp this week. And I'm not sure I really probably believe David Haye on that. A couple of other things to unpack there, because there's been a number of comments regarding Joseph Parker's training, and should he have actually been, knowing that the fight was likely, and from what David Haye is saying, the money didn't seem to be an issue, the date didn't seem to be an issue, all the major issues seemed to be ironed out, except the contract hadn't been done. So he's saying, well, why weren't you training? We were looking like we were going to be fighting on that date. You could have been in training camp. It seemed like things were going to get over the line here. And there is a point in that. And in my previous video on this, I sort of had raised the issue of, well, Parker, he's based in New Zealand, he has training camps in Las Vegas, and obviously the whole thing is a bit of an expensive affair, and then obviously he would have that final couple of weeks in the UK, and Higgins had been pushing for about 9 weeks or so, I think they said, so it would be 7 weeks in camp and 2 weeks in the United Kingdom. And I think we're about 8.5 weeks out from what David Haye had said from that April 20th date. So you can mount an argument that he could have been, if he knew that it was pretty much a done deal, he could have been in camp here. So to call it a trivial reason, I can see what David Haye is saying, but at the same time, given where Joseph Parker is at currently in his career, I can see the other side, and I can understand their position that they don't want to skimp on the training time. They don't want to do anything that could sort of maybe give an advantage to the other guys and potentially disadvantage Parker, because they did feel that the shorter training camp for the Dillian Whyte fight, which I think was about was it a 5 or 6 week camp and a couple of weeks in the UK, they didn't think it was enough time overall and thought it was potentially a contributing factor in that loss to Dillian Whyte. And he did come in heavier for that fight, and they had spoke about the conditioning after the fight, that because it was a shorter camp, they didn't have as much time to get the fitness to where they would have otherwise liked it to have been. But you can't get it back, and obviously they're a little bit gun-shy about getting into a fight where things don't meet their expectations and how they want to do things going forward. But we did know that this was coming down the pipe for a while now, so yeah, to be honest, he could have been training, but clearly Higgins didn't want to pull the trigger on a training camp, all the money that would be spent and associated with that, and all the logistics and other bits and pieces leading up until, you know, the fight week and all that sort of stuff, until he had something in his hand that he could sign and make it official. And I said to someone in a comment the other week, I don't start a job without seeing a contract and signing it. You know, doing things on good faith, you know, sometimes that can actually land you in hot water in a position you don't want to be in. And obviously, in this case, in boxing, it can be a bit of a murky world. They didn't want to take that risk. It's a shame that the fight hasn't happened, because I think it was an ideal fight for Joseph Parker to make a return to the UK. They've talked about the UK for Parker as getting back in there. And someone like a David Price or a Derek Chisora, someone who is a beatable opponent that he could potentially look good against, you know, that would have been a good reintroduction to the local market in the United Kingdom. But we can't get that one back. Seems to be off for now. They are open to having the Derek Chisora fight at a later date, but we'll have to see what happens. It sounds like Derek Chisora is now in camp. He's still going to be preparing for a fight. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing him in the Carlos Takam rematch. That's probably one of the viable options out there that I think many fans would like to see, and there would be an interest given the outcome of the first fight, because Takam was putting a beating on Chisora, we can't forget that, and then obviously Takam got spectacularly knocked out sort of out of the blue after Chisora had taken a beating over several rounds. It was a very fun fight, one of the most high octane fights of all of 2018. I'd want to see it again. So we'll have to see what happens. Anyway, what do you make of it? Do you think Joseph Parker and his team were being trivial, as David Haye says, or do you think it was fair enough that they didn't have a contract, they didn't want to commit to something that they didn't know was a sure thing? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.